The last thing Beatrice Fairmont expected on her 23rd birthday was to be standing alone against the barn wall while every other woman in Parowan, Utah spun across the makeshift dance floor in the arms of a partner. She had traveled 3 months by wagon train from Philadelphia to start fresh in the Utah Territory, arriving just 2 weeks ago with nothing but her late mother's wedding ring, a trunk of modest dresses, and the deed to a small piece of land her father had won in a card game before his death. The autumn air in 1878 carried the scent of hay and wood smoke, and the fiddle music that floated through the evening should have filled her with joy. But instead, it only emphasized how utterly alone she was in this strange new world. She smoothed down her blue calico dress, the nicest one she owned, and tried not to feel sorry for herself. The other women had been kind enough when she first arrived, helping her settle into the tiny cabin on her property, bringing her preserves and bread, teaching her how to manage the cast iron stove that seemed determined to either burn her food or leave it raw. But kindness only went so far when you were an outsider, when you had no family name to vouch for you, when the whispers followed you about being a woman alone trying to work land that grown men struggled with. The barn had been decorated with lanterns that cast a warm, golden glow over everything, and couples twirled past her in a blur of skirts and boots and laughter. She recognized most of them now. Sarah Mitchell with her husband James, married 15 years with 6 children. Young Mary Peterson, barely 19, dancing with the blacksmith's son, who everyone said would propose before Christmas. Even Alina Hartwell, who had to be pushing 60, was being spun around by her equally ancient husband, both of them grinning like newlyweds. Beatrice looked down at her hands, work roughened already from just 2 weeks of trying to fix the fence posts on her property, trying to clear the irrigation ditch, trying to figure out how to prepare for a Utah winter that everyone assured her would be brutal. Philadelphia had been cold, but the mountains here promised something different entirely. Shame to see a pretty girl without a partner. The voice came from her left, deep and warm with just a hint of amusement. Beatrice looked up to find a tall cowboy leaning against the barn wall beside her, though she could have sworn that spot had been empty just moments before. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that seemed to shift between brown and gold in the lantern light. He wore the typical garb of a working ranch hand, dusty boots and worn denim pants, a vest over a cotton shirt, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. But there was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that suggested he was more than just another hired hand. "I am managing fine," Beatrice said, lifting her chin slightly. She had learned in Philadelphia that showing weakness only invited more trouble, and she suspected that lesson held true everywhere. "Did not say you were not managing," the cowboy replied easily. "Just said it was a shame." 2 different things entirely. He pushed off from the wall and turned to face her fully, extending his hand in a gesture that was somehow both casual and formal at once. "Name is August Xavier. I work the Triple Creek Ranch about 5 miles north of here. Been away driving cattle to Denver the past month, just got back this morning. Heard there was a new arrival in town, a lady from back east trying to make a go of the old Sullivan property." Beatrice hesitated before taking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, calloused in the way of someone who spent his days working with ropes and leather and hard labor. Beatrice Fairmont. And yes, that would be me, though I am beginning to think everyone believes I have lost my mind. "Probably they do," August said, and there was no judgment in his voice, just frank honesty. "That is hard land, and Jacob Sullivan broke his back trying to work it for near 20 years before he gave up and moved to Salt Lake City." Takes a lot of stubbornness to look at a failed homestead and see opportunity. Or desperation, Beatrice said before she could stop herself. August studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Well now, desperation and determination look mighty similar from the outside. Difference is all in what you do with them. He gestured toward the dance floor where another song was starting up, a slower waltz this time. So what do you say? Want to give all these folks something new to talk about tomorrow? What do you mean? Beatrice asked, though her heart had started beating faster. August's smile was warm and genuine, reaching all the way to his eyes. I mean that is about to change. You being the only woman here without a dance partner, if you will have me, that is. Beatrice glanced around the barn, seeing the way some of the women had already noticed August, how they whispered behind their hands and shot curious glances in her direction. She had spent 2 weeks being the object of speculation and pity, 2 weeks of being the poor Eastern girl who did not know what she was getting into. The prospect of walking onto that dance floor, of claiming even a small moment of belonging, was both terrifying and irresistible. I should warn you, she said, placing her hand in his. I have not danced in over a year. I may step on your feet. Lucky for you I have tough feet, August replied, leading her toward the center of the barn. The other dancers made room for them, some with surprised expressions, others with knowing smiles. Beatrice could feel every eye in the building on her as August placed one hand at her waist and took her other hand in his. The fiddle sang out sweet and clear, and then they were moving, and Beatrice discovered that August Xavier was an excellent dancer, leading her so smoothly that even her rusty skills came back to her. You are staring at your feet, August said quietly, his voice pitched just for her. Look up. Trust me to keep you from tripping. Beatrice forced herself to lift her gaze and found herself looking directly into his face, close enough now to see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his expression held nothing but patient encouragement. That is harder than it sounds. Trust usually is, August agreed, but it gets easier with practice. They completed one full turn around the floor before Beatrice found her voice again. Why did you ask me to dance? You do not know anything about me. No, you came a long way by yourself, August said. No, you are trying to work land that scares off most men. No, you have been standing against that wall for the past hour looking like you wanted to be anywhere else, but you stayed anyway because leaving would have felt like giving up. That is more than most folks bother to learn. Those are just observations, Beatrice said. That is not knowing someone. It is a start, though, August replied. Besides, figured you deserved at least one dance at your first social gathering in Parowan. Seemed only right to make sure that happened. The song ended, but August did not immediately release her. Instead he waited, his hand still at her waist, until the next song began. This one was livelier, a reel that had the other dancers whooping and spinning with increased energy. August raised an eyebrow in question, and Beatrice found herself nodding before she had fully thought it through. This dance was different, faster and more complex, with patterns that required them to occasionally separate and rejoin with different partners before coming back together. Beatrice found herself briefly in the arms of James Mitchell, who gave her a friendly nod, then spinning away to clasp hands with young Thomas Peterson, who seemed too shy to meet her eyes. But each time the dance brought her back to August, and each time she felt a little steadier, a little more confident, a little more like maybe she could belong here after all. By the time the second song ended, Beatrice was breathless and laughing, her earlier melancholy forgotten in the simple joy of movement and music. August guided her to the refreshment table where someone had set out apple cider and cookies, and they stood there drinking from tin cups while her heart rate slowly returned to normal. "Thank you," Beatrice said sincerely. "You did not have to do that." "Wanted to," August said simply. "Besides, been riding the trail for 4 weeks straight. Dancing with a pretty girl is a fine way to remember why we bother coming back to civilization at all." Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment, unused to such direct appreciation. "Is that what Parowan is? Civilization? Compared to sleeping on the ground and eating beans cooked over a campfire?" August grinned. "Yes, madam, this is downright luxurious." "Tell me about it," Beatrice said impulsively. "The cattle drive. What is it like?" So August did, describing the long days in the saddle, the way the herd moved like a single living organism, the brilliant stars that seemed close enough to touch on cloudless nights, the constant vigilance required to watch for predators or spooked cattle or sudden changes in weather. He told her about the other men on the drive, about Cookie, who could somehow make even the plainest ingredients taste good, about young Willie, who was on his first drive and spent the first week so sore he could barely walk, about the time they had to swim the entire herd across a swollen river, and how his heart had been in his throat the whole time. Beatrice listened, fascinated by this glimpse into a world so different from anything she had known in Philadelphia. Her father had been a clerk, spending his days bent over ledgers in a cramped office. Her own work before coming west had been taking in sewing, squinting at tiny stitches by lamplight until her eyes ached. The idea of spending weeks under open sky, of working with animals and weather and raw physical challenge, felt almost exotic. "Is it the same men every drive?" she asked. "Mostly," August said, "though we lost a few this year. Old Henry decided his bones were too brittle for the trail anymore, and Marcus got married and wanted to stay closer to home. The boss, Thomas Garrett, he owns the Triple Creek. He has been good to work for, fair and honest. Hard to find that in a boss. And you have worked there long, going on 6 years now," August said. "Started as just a hand but worked my way up to foreman about 2 years back. Means more responsibility but better pay, and Garrett listens when I have ideas about how to improve things." Before Beatrice could respond, Sarah Mitchell approached them with a warm smile. "Beatrice, dear, I wanted to make sure you knew about the quilting circle. We meet every Wednesday afternoon at the church. You would be most welcome to join us." "Thank you," Beatrice said, surprised by the invitation. "I would like that." "Excellent," Sarah said, then turned her attention to August. "And August Xavier, you better save a dance for me before the night is over, or I will tell your mother you have forgotten all your manners." August laughed, a rich, warm sound. "Would not dream of it, Mrs. Mitchell, though my mother would probably say I never had manners to begin with." Sarah swatted his arm playfully before moving away, and Beatrice looked at August with new curiosity. "Your mother lives here?" "About a mile outside town," August confirmed. "My parents homesteaded here back in '55 when Parowan was barely more than a crossroads. Lost my father to pneumonia 8 years ago, but Ma is still going strong. Got 2 younger sisters as well, both married now with families of their own. I am the oldest, so Ma claims I am her biggest disappointment since I have not given her grandchildren yet." "That seems like a very mother thing to say," Beatrice said with a small smile. "She means well," August said. "Just wants to see me settled and happy, which is reasonable enough. I have just been too busy working the ranch to think much about courting and such." The evening continued, and August did dance with Sarah Mitchell as promised, and with several other women including his own mother, who Beatrice was introduced to briefly. Martha Xavier was a sturdy woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake, and she looked at Beatrice with obvious interest when August brought her over. "So you are the brave soul taking on the Sullivan place," Martha said. "That is ambitious." "Perhaps more foolish than brave," Beatrice admitted. "But it is mine, and I intend to make something of it." "Good," Martha said firmly. "This territory was built by people who were too stubborn to know when to quit. You will fit right in." She glanced at her son with an expression that suggested years of practice at subtle manipulation. "August knows that land well. He helped Jacob Sullivan with the irrigation system a few years back, before Jacob gave up and left. I am sure he would be happy to give you some advice if you needed it." "Ma," August said with patient exasperation. "What? I am just being neighborly," Martha said innocently, though her eyes twinkled with mischief. Despite the awkwardness, Beatrice found herself smiling. There was something comforting about Martha's straightforward warmth, so different from the carefully measured social interactions she had known in Philadelphia. Here, people seemed to say what they meant, or at least they were more obvious about their intentions. As the evening drew toward midnight, August found Beatrice again. "I should be heading back to the ranch," he said. "Early start tomorrow, but I was thinking if you would not mind some company, I could ride over to your place sometime this week. Take a look at your property, maybe offer some suggestions about preparing for winter." No charge, just being neighborly like Ma said. Beatrice knew she should probably be cautious. She had been warned about trusting strangers, about the dangers a woman alone might face. But there was something about August that felt steady and safe, and she desperately needed help that she could not afford to pay for. "That would be very kind," she said. "I would appreciate it." "How about Tuesday afternoon?" August suggested. "That would give me time to get caught up on work at the ranch." "Tuesday would be fine," Beatrice agreed. August tipped his hat to her, a gesture that managed to be both casual and courtly. "Then I will see you Tuesday, Miss Fairmont. Thank you for the dances. They were the best part of coming home." He left before she could formulate a response to that, slipping out into the night, and Beatrice was left standing there with her heart doing strange things in her chest and the phantom warmth of his hand at her waist. The next few days passed in a blur of hard work. Beatrice rose each morning before dawn, heating water on the temperamental stove for washing, eating a simple breakfast of bread and preserves, and then heading out to tackle the endless list of tasks that needed doing. The cabin itself was sound enough, though it needed chinking in several places where the wind whistled through gaps in the logs. The barn was in worse shape, with several boards loose and the roof sagging on one side. The irrigation ditch that fed water from the creek to her small plot of arable land was clogged with debris and vegetation. She worked until her hands blistered and her back ached, falling into bed each night so exhausted that sleep came instantly, despite the unfamiliar sounds of the Utah wilderness. Coyotes sang in the distance. The wind rustled through the cottonwood trees. An owl hooted somewhere close by. She was utterly, completely alone in a way she had never been in the crowded streets of Philadelphia, and some nights the loneliness felt like a physical weight on her chest. But she had chosen this. After her father died and she realized there was nothing left for her in the city, when the other seamstresses whispered that she was too proud, too particular, too unwilling to accept the advances of the shop owner who could have made her life easier, she had found that deed in her father's papers and decided to take a chance on something different. Even if it killed her, it would be on her own terms. Tuesday afternoon arrived with clear skies and temperatures that felt pleasant in the sunshine but promised cold once the sun set. Beatrice had made an effort to clean up, washing her face and hands, changing into a dress that was not covered in dirt and sweat, pinning her light brown hair up more neatly. She told herself it was just common courtesy, Nothing to do with the fact that her stomach fluttered nervously every time she thought about August Xavier riding up to her cabin. She was mending a loose board on the porch steps when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw August riding a sturdy bay horse leading a pack mule behind him. He waved as he got closer, and she stood, brushing sawdust from her skirt. "Afternoon, Miss Fairmont," August called out as he dismounted. "Hope I am not interrupting anything critical." "Just trying to keep the porch from collapsing," Beatrice said, "which I think is a losing battle, but I have to try." August walked over and crouched down to examine her work. "Actually, you are doing pretty well. This board here, though, you want to use longer nails. These ones you have got are not going deep enough into the beam underneath, so they will work loose again in a few weeks." "I was using what I found in the shed," Beatrice admitted. "Fair enough," August said, straightening up. "Good news is I brought some supplies." He gestured to the mule. "Figured you probably did not have everything you would need, so I loaded up some extras. Got nails in different sizes, some rope, extra chinking material, a couple of tools that might be useful." "I cannot pay you for all that," Beatrice said immediately, anxiety spiking. "Not asking you to," August said easily. "Consider it a loan. Once you are established, if you want to pay me back, fine. If not, that is fine too. Way I see it, having a working homestead next to the Sullivan place benefits everyone. Vacant land attracts trouble, draws in squatters or worse. Better for the whole area if you succeed." It was logical, Beatrice supposed, though she suspected his motives were more generous than he was letting on. Still, she was not in a position to refuse help out of pride. "Thank you, that is very kind. Why do not you show me around?" August suggested. "Let me see what we are working with." For the next hour, they walked the property together. August asked questions and took notes in a small leather journal he pulled from his vest pocket. He examined the irrigation ditch, the barn, the fence line, the small vegetable garden that was already starting to die back for the season. He climbed up to check the cabin roof, poked at the stone foundation, tested the strength of the porch posts. "All right," he said finally, settling onto the porch step beside where Beatrice sat watching him. "Want to hear the honest truth?" "I think I need to," Beatrice said, steeling herself. "You have got about 6 weeks before the snow starts, maybe 8 if we are lucky," August began. "That is not enough time to do everything that needs doing, so we need to prioritize. First priority is making sure your cabin is weatherproof. That means finishing the chinking, checking that the roof is solid, making sure your stove is drawing properly and your chimney is sound. Second priority is laying in supplies. You need food, fuel for heat, feed for any livestock you might have, though I do not see any animals yet." "I have not been able to afford any," Beatrice admitted. "I spent most of my money on the wagon train and initial supplies." August nodded thoughtfully. "That is a problem. You need at least a few chickens for eggs, maybe a milk cow if you can manage it. I can talk to some folks, see if anyone has animals they would be willing to sell cheap or trade for work. Third priority is preparing the land for spring planting. That irrigation ditch needs to be cleared and properly maintained, and you should think about what you want to grow come March." "What about the barn?" Beatrice asked. "It is in terrible shape." "It is," August agreed, "but you are not keeping animals in it right now, so it can wait until spring. Same with most of the fence line. Focus on survival first, improvements second." The practicality of it all was both daunting and oddly reassuring. At least now she had a plan, or the beginning of one. "That still sounds like more work than I can manage alone in 6 weeks." "Probably is," August said frankly, "which is why I am going to help you." "You have your own work at the ranch," Beatrice protested. "I do," August acknowledged, "but Garrett gives us Sundays off and I can spare a few evenings a week." Plus, I can put the word out, see if some of the other hands want to make a few extra dollars helping out on their free time. Most cowboys are decent with repairs and building, and a lot of them get bored sitting around doing nothing on Sundays. I told you I cannot afford to pay anyone, Beatrice said, frustration creeping into her voice. Can you cook? August asked. The question caught her off guard. What? Can you cook? Make a decent meal? August repeated patiently. Yes, Beatrice said slowly. I am not fancy, but I can make basic meals. Then there is your payment, August said. Cowboys will work for food, especially home-cooked food that is not beans and hardtack. You feed whoever comes to help, and that will be payment enough. You might even find you have more volunteers than you know what to do with. It seemed too simple, but Beatrice was learning that things in Utah Territory worked differently than they had in Philadelphia. People helped each other because they had to, because survival often depended on community cooperation. All right, she said. If you really think people would be willing to help, I would be grateful for it. Good, August said, standing up and brushing off his pants. Now, how about we get started on that chinking? I have got a few hours before I need to head back, and 2 people working goes twice as fast as 1. They worked together as the afternoon sun slanted lower across the valley. August mixed the chinking material, a combination of mud and straw and lime that would harden to seal the gaps between the logs, while Beatrice applied it with a flat wooden tool, pressing it deep into the cracks. It was messy work, and she was acutely aware of August working beside her, the easy competence of his movements, the way he occasionally offered gentle corrections to her technique. You are getting the hang of it, he said after a while. See how that section looks much smoother than where you started. You have got good hands for this kind of work. My hands are covered in mud and straw, Beatrice said wryly. Well, yes, August agreed with a grin, but they are covered in mud and straw in all the right places. That is what counts. Despite the hard work and her aching muscles, Beatrice found herself enjoying the afternoon. August was easy to talk to, sharing stories about the ranch and the surrounding area, asking questions about her life in Philadelphia that seemed genuinely interested rather than merely polite. She told him about the crowded tenement where she had lived, about her work as a seamstress, about her father's slow decline after her mother's death 5 years earlier. Must have been hard, August said quietly, losing both parents, then leaving everything familiar behind. It was, Beatrice admitted. But staying felt harder, like I was slowly disappearing, becoming smaller and smaller until there would be nothing left of me at all. At least here, if I fail, it will be while trying to build something rather than watching it all slowly crumble away. August stopped working and looked at her directly. You are not going to fail. I am not going to let you. The intensity of his statement, the certainty in his voice, made Beatrice's breath catch. You barely know me. Why would you care so much? August was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke his voice was thoughtful, careful. Honestly, I am not entirely sure, but when I saw you standing against that barn wall on Saturday night, looking so determined to be all right even though you clearly were not, something just clicked into place. Felt like I was supposed to be there, supposed to ask you to dance, supposed to help. Ma would say it was God's providence. I do not know about all that, but I do know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since then, and I would like to see you succeed here. Would like to see you happy. Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she was sure August must be able to hear it. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such simple honesty, such lack of artifice or ulterior motive. I do not know what to say to that. Do not have to say anything, August said, turning back to his work. Just wanted you to know where I stand so there is no confusion. I aim to help you get this homestead running, and I would like to court you properly while I am at it if you are amenable. But those are two separate things. Even if you have no interest in me romantically, I will still help with the homestead. Want to be clear about that. You want to court me? Beatrice repeated, stunned. I do, August said simply. You are brave and smart, and you do not give up even when things are hard. You are pretty too, but that is just a bonus. Mainly I like who you are as a person, what I have seen of it so far. Figured I would put my intentions out there honestly rather than dancing around it. Life is too short and uncertain out here to waste time being coy. Beatrice tried to process this, her mind racing. She had been in Parowan less than 3 weeks. She had danced with this man exactly twice. He had spent one afternoon helping her with chinking. And yet here he was, calmly stating that he wanted to court her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I do not know what proper courting looks like here, she said finally. I have never been courted at all, properly or otherwise. August glanced at her in surprise. Never. Pretty woman like you. My father needed me after my mother died, Beatrice explained. And then he was sick for a long time before he passed. There was no time for socializing, and the men who did show interest were mostly looking for a wife who could contribute a wage, not for any particular attachment to me as a person. Their loss, August said firmly. And to answer your question, courting here is probably not that different from back east. I would come calling regularly, we would spend time together, talk and get to know each other better. I would meet expectations of respectability, make sure your reputation stayed intact. Eventually, if things went well between us, I would ask you to marry me. If you said yes, we would get married and build a life together. If you said no, we would part as friends and I would wish you well. Just like that, Beatrice asked. So straightforward. Do not see much point in making it complicated, August said. Either two people suit each other or they do not. Only way to find out is to spend time together and see what happens. It was such a radically practical approach compared to the elaborate social rituals she had observed in Philadelphia. But then again, she was not in Philadelphia anymore. She was in the Utah Territory, where life was harder and people were more direct by necessity. All right, Beatrice heard herself say. You may court me, but I cannot promise anything beyond that. I need to focus on getting this homestead working, and I cannot let myself be distracted. Understood, August said, and she could hear the smile in his voice even though she was not looking at him. I will do my best to be a helpful distraction rather than a hindering one. They finished the section of wall they had been working on, as the sun touched the top of the mountains to the west, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that took Beatrice's breath away. She had never seen sunsets like this in the city, where buildings blocked the horizon and smoke from factories turned everything gray and dingy. I should head back, August said reluctantly, washing his hands in the bucket of water they had been using. But I will come back Sunday afternoon, and I will bring a couple of the boys if they are willing. We can make real progress on getting you ready for winter. Thank you, Beatrice said, for everything. The supplies, the help, the advice. I am not sure how I would manage without it. You would figure it out, August said confidently, but there is no shame in accepting help when it is offered freely. He collected his hat from where he had left it on the porch rail and settled it on his head, then paused. One more thing. Since we are officially courting now, you should probably call me August instead of Mr. Xavier, and I would like to call you Beatrice, if that is acceptable. It is, Beatrice said, finding herself smiling despite her exhaustion. Good night, August. Good night, Beatrice, he replied, and the way he said her name sent warmth flooding through her chest. She watched him ride away in the gathering dusk, then turned to look at the section of wall they had completed together. It was solid work, the kind that would last through the winter and beyond. Maybe, just maybe, she really could make a life here. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Beatrice had risen early to prepare food, using some of her precious stores of flour and sugar to make biscuits and a dried apple pie, cooking a pot of beans with salt pork, frying up cornbread in her best skillet. She told herself it was just practical payment for labor, nothing to do with wanting to make a good impression on August and whoever else might show up to help. They arrived mid-afternoon, 3 men on horseback. August led the way, followed by 2 other cowboys she did not recognize. One appeared to be in his early 30s with a thick beard and powerful shoulders. The other was younger, maybe 20 or 21, with sandy hair and an eager expression. "Beatrice, this is Don Carson and Willie Martinez," August said, handling introductions as they dismounted. "They both work at Triple Creek with me. Don is our best carpenter, and Willie is good general labor despite being relatively green." "Madam," Don said with a respectful nod. Willie just looked slightly awestruck, as if he could not quite believe he was at a woman's homestead. "Thank you for coming," Beatrice said. "I have food prepared for whenever you get hungry." "Much appreciated, madam," Don said. "Now, August said you need work done on the barn. How about Willie and I take a look at that while August helps you with whatever else needs doing?" It was tactful, Beatrice realized, giving her and August time together while still getting work done. She appreciated the consideration even as it made her slightly nervous. What exactly had August told these men about their situation? August seemed to read her thoughts. "Told them I was courting you," he said once Don and Willie had headed toward the barn. "Seemed better to be upfront about it. That way nobody gets the wrong idea about propriety and such." "Does everyone in the territory know your business?" Beatrice asked, though she was more amused than annoyed. "Pretty much," August admitted cheerfully. "Hard to keep secrets when everyone knows everyone else, but it also means people look out for each other. Nobody is going to say anything improper about you being courted by a respectable foreman. If anything, having my interest known publicly will keep away any men who might otherwise bother you." Beatrice had not thought about it that way, but she supposed it made sense. In Philadelphia, reputation was everything but also incredibly fragile, easily destroyed by rumor or innuendo. Here, it seemed like reputation was more robust, built on actions and community standing rather than whispers. "So what should we work on today?" she asked. "How about that irrigation ditch?" August suggested. "It needs to be cleared out before the ground freezes, and it is a 2-person job. One to dig, one to haul away the debris." They spent the afternoon in companionable labor. August worked with a pickaxe, breaking up the packed debris and accumulated sediment in the ditch, while Beatrice followed behind with a shovel, scooping everything into a wheelbarrow and dumping it in a pile that would later be useful as compost. It was brutal work, made harder by the fact that the ditch was nearly a 1/4 mile long, but they made steady progress. "Tell me more about the Triple Creek Ranch," Beatrice said during a water break. "What is it like working there?" "It is good honest work," August said, leaning on his pickaxe. "Garrett runs about 500 head of cattle, plus horses and some sheep. We do 2 major drives a year, spring and fall, taking cattle to market. Rest of the time it is maintaining fences, managing water sources, watching for predators, breaking horses, all the usual ranch work. It is hard but satisfying. Every day you can see what you accomplished, you know." "I do know," Beatrice said, thinking of the visible progress they were making on the ditch. "That is something I missed working as a seamstress. You make a dress, you send it out, You never know if it fit properly or if the customer was happy. Here, at least I can see what I am building." "Exactly," August said. "Though I imagine seamstress work requires a lot of skill and patience. I cannot even sew on a button properly." "I could teach you," Beatrice offered, then felt her cheeks warm at the implied intimacy of such a domestic task shared between them. August's expression softened. "I would like that. Maybe someday soon you can show me, and I will teach you to throw a proper lasso in exchange. Fair trade." They returned to work, and the afternoon passed in a blur of physical effort. From the barn came the sounds of hammering and sawing, Don and Willie working on the worst of the structural problems. Occasionally one of them would call out a question, and August would go confer with them, leaving Beatrice to work alone for a few minutes before returning. As the sun began to set, they all gathered on the porch to eat. Beatrice served the food she had prepared, and the men ate with enthusiasm that was gratifying even as it made her slightly self-conscious. She was not used to feeding ranch hands, to sitting with men who were not family and sharing a meal in this casual, friendly way. "Miss Fairmont, this is the best pie I have had in months," Willie said earnestly through a mouthful of apple pie. "You could make a fortune selling these in town." "I appreciate the compliment," Beatrice said with a smile, "though I suspect you are being overly generous." "No, madam, he is right," Don agreed. "You have got a touch with pastry. Light and flaky, not tough like what Cookie makes at the ranch. No offense to Cookie, but his specialty is beans, not baking." August caught Beatrice's eye and gave her a look that seemed to say, "Told you so," about the power of good food as payment. She bit back a smile and served second helpings to everyone. "We got the worst of the barn roof patched," Don reported between bites. "Replaced about 10 boards that were completely rotted through. It is not pretty, but it will hold through the winter. Come spring, you will want to do a more thorough rebuild, but this should keep the snow out." "That is wonderful, thank you," Beatrice said gratefully. "Willie and I can come back next Sunday if you like," Don offered. "Get some more work done. I am thinking the chicken coop could use some attention, and August mentioned you might be getting some hens soon." "I would be grateful for any help you are willing to give," Beatrice said. "And I will make sure there is plenty of food." "Then you have got a deal, madam," Don said, standing and stretching. "But we should probably head back now. Willie and I are on early shift tomorrow." After Don and Willie left, August lingered, helping Beatrice carry the dishes inside. The cabin felt small with both of them in it, intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. She was acutely aware of August's presence as they worked side by side, washing and drying the plates and utensils. "Your cabin is nice," August said, looking around at the simple space. "You have made it homey." Beatrice followed his gaze, seeing the space through his eyes. She had not brought much with her from Philadelphia, but she had unpacked what she could. Her mother's quilt on the bed, providing both warmth and memory. A few books on the small shelf she had built, precious volumes saved from selling. The photograph of her parents on their wedding day, propped on the mantel in a simple frame. A jar of wildflowers she had picked, brightening the rough wooden table. "Thank you," she said. "It is not much, but it is mine." "That counts for a lot," August said. He dried the last plate and set it on the shelf, then turned to face her directly. "Beatrice, I want to say something, and I want you to hear me out before you respond." "All right," Beatrice said, her mouth suddenly dry. "I know this is all moving fast," August began. "You have only been here a few weeks, we have only known each other a few days, but I meant what I said the other day about my intentions. I am not a man who plays games or courts women lightly. When I saw you at that dance, something in me just knew. Knew you were special, knew I wanted to be part of your life. I am asking you to keep an open mind as we get to know each other, to consider a future where we are partners in more than just getting your homestead running. Beatrice's heart hammered in her chest. Everything he was saying sounded too good to be true, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. August, I do not understand why you would want that. I am nobody. I have nothing to offer. You could have your pick of women in Parowan, women who already know how to live here, who have families and connections and dowries. I do not want those women, August said simply. I want you. I want your courage and your determination and the way you keep going even when things are hard. I want to watch you build this dream of yours and be there to help make it happen. I want to come home to your smile and your apple pie and the sound of you humming while you work. I want all of it, Beatrice, if you will give me a chance to prove I am worthy of you. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his declaration. You really mean all of that? Every word, August confirmed. And I will prove it to you as many times as it takes for you to believe me. She stepped forward impulsively and took his hand, feeling the calloused warmth of his palm against hers. I believe you. I am terrified and it seems impossibly fast, but I believe you. And I want the same things, I think. I want to see where this could go between us. August's face lit up with such pure joy that it transformed him, making him look younger and more carefree than she had yet seen him. Yeah, Beatrice confirmed, and then she was in his arms, held carefully as if she were something precious. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, smell the scent of him, wood smoke and leather and something uniquely August. They stood like that for a long moment before August gently released her. I should go. Do not want to compromise your reputation by staying too late. Probably wise, Beatrice agreed reluctantly. August collected his hat and gear, then paused at the door. I will be back Tuesday evening after work. We can finish that chinking on the north wall. And I will see about getting you some chickens this week, see who has birds they are willing to part with. You do not have to do all of this, Beatrice said. I want to, August replied. Besides, we are courting now. Helping my girl get established is just what a fellow does. Your girl, Beatrice repeated, testing the words. They felt strange on her tongue, but also right in a way she had not expected. If you will have me, August said. Is that all right, me calling you that? Yes, Beatrice said softly. It is more than all right. August's smile could have lit the darkest night. Then I will see you Tuesday, my dear Beatrice. He left, and Beatrice closed the door behind him, leaning against it as she tried to process everything that had just happened. 3 weeks ago she had been alone in the world, adrift and uncertain. Now she had the beginning of a community, the foundation of a home, and a man who wanted to court her with an intensity that still took her breath away. It was almost too much good fortune to believe in, but the proof was all around her. The chinking August had helped her complete. The patched barn roof, the cleared irrigation ditch, the lingering warmth of his embrace. This was real. She was building something real, and she was not alone in doing it. The next weeks passed in a rhythm that quickly became familiar. August came by Tuesday and Thursday evenings after finishing his work at the Triple Creek, staying until twilight to help with various projects around the homestead. They worked on chinking and repairs and all the endless small tasks that needed completing before winter. But they also talked, sharing stories and dreams and slowly learning the shape of each other's hearts. Beatrice learned that August loved horses with a passion that made his voice gentle and warm. That he had once wanted to be a schoolteacher, but his father's death had forced him to set aside that dream to support his family. That he had a sweet tooth for anything with honey. That he could not carry a tune to save his life but loved music anyway. That he worried about his mother living alone even though she insisted she was perfectly capable. August learned that Beatrice had always wanted to see the ocean but never had the chance, that she read poetry when she could not sleep, especially Wordsworth and Whitman, that she was terrified of spiders but would face down any challenge if she felt she had no other choice, that she had loved her parents deeply and still grieved them in quiet moments, though she tried not to dwell on the sadness. Sundays became communal work days, with Don and Willie coming regularly and sometimes bringing other ranch hands who wanted to earn a home-cooked meal. The chicken coop got built and stocked with 6 hens, and a rooster that August acquired through a complicated trade involving fixed bridal work and a promise to help with spring branding. A milk cow named Clover arrived courtesy of August Xavier, who claimed she was downsizing her herd but whom everyone knew was just finding an excuse to help without making Beatrice feel like charity. Beatrice attended her first quilting circle and found herself welcomed with cautious warmth by the other women. Sarah Mitchell was kind. Eleanor Hartwell was brusque but fair. Young Mary Peterson seemed to view Beatrice with something like awe for daring to homestead alone. They asked polite questions about her life in Philadelphia and gave advice about managing the Utah winter, and if some of their questions were really just veiled curiosity about her courtship with August Xavier, well, Beatrice did not mind too much. "He is a good man," Sarah told her one Wednesday as they stitched together blocks for a quilt. "His father was good too, worked himself into an early grave trying to provide for his family. August has that same quality, that drive to take care of the people he loves. He will be a devoted husband when he marries." "We have only been courting a few weeks," Beatrice protested, though her cheeks warmed at the implication. "Time moves different out here," Eleanor said bluntly. "People know faster whether someone will suit or not. You two suit. Everyone can see it. Just a matter of time before he asks and you say yes." Beatrice wanted to argue, but the truth was she could already imagine saying yes. Could imagine August as a permanent fixture in her life, in her home, in her future. It should have terrified her, how quickly she was falling for him. Instead, it just felt inevitable, like rain after dry weather or spring after a hard winter. October faded into early November, and the first snow fell on a Sunday morning. Beatrice woke to find the world transformed. Everything covered in a pristine blanket of white that muffled sound and reflected the pale sunlight in dazzling brightness. She stood on her porch wrapped in a shawl, marveling at the beauty of it, and then she heard hoofbeats and turned to see August riding up through the snow. He dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail, then joined her on the porch, and for a moment they just stood together watching the fat snowflakes drift down from the gray sky. "Winter is here," August said quietly. "You ready for it?" Beatrice looked around at the homestead they had worked so hard to prepare. The cabin with its chinked walls and sound roof, the barn that would shelter Clover and the chickens, the woodshed stacked full of fuel for the stove, the root cellar stocked with vegetables and preserves, enough to see her through to spring. "I think I am, thanks to you." "Thanks to you too," August corrected. "You did most of the work, Beatrice. I just helped." "You did more than help," Beatrice said firmly. "You saved me, August. I would have frozen or starved without your help, and we both know it." August turned to face her, his expression serious. "Then I am glad I was there to help. Glad I walked into that barn dance and saw you standing alone. Glad I had the courage to ask you to dance. Every bit of this, every moment, I am glad for it." Beatrice felt the truth of her feelings rise up, undeniable and clear. "I love you," she said, and the words felt like freedom, like finally admitting something she had known for weeks but been too afraid to voice. "I know it is fast and probably foolish, but I love you, August Xavier." August's intake of breath was audible in the quiet morning. "Beatrice, my dear, brave, wonderful Beatrice." I love you too. Have loved you since I watched you dance that first night, so determined to enjoy yourself even though you were nervous. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you." He pulled her close, and Beatrice went willingly, tilting her face up to his. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, flavored with snowflakes and promise. The second was deeper, full of all the emotion they had been building toward through weeks of shared work and conversation, and slowly growing intimacy. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Beatrice felt like her entire body was glowing with warmth despite the cold air. "Marry me," August said, the words tumbling out urgent and heartfelt. "I know this is fast. I know you might want to wait, but Beatrice, marry me. Let me be here with you through the winter and every season after. Let me help you build this dream into something even bigger than you imagined. Let me love you for the rest of my life." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but they were joyful ones. "Yes, yes, August, I will marry you. I want all of that, everything you just said. I want to build a life with you." August let out a whoop of joy and spun her around right there on the porch, and Beatrice found herself laughing helplessly, clinging to his shoulders, feeling more alive and happy than she could ever remember being. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I do not have a ring yet," he admitted, "but I will get you one, a proper one, or we could use your mother's wedding ring if you wanted, since it means something to you, whatever you prefer." "My mother's ring," Beatrice said without hesitation. "I cannot think of anything more perfect than starting our marriage with her blessing, even though she is not here to give it in person." "Then that is what we will do," August said. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled onto her cheeks. "When do you want to get married? We could wait until spring if you want a big wedding, time to plan and such." But Beatrice shook her head. "No, I do not need a big wedding. I just need you and a preacher and the commitment we are making to each other. Could we do it soon? Before Christmas?" "We can do it whenever you want," August said. "How about 3 weeks? That gives time for the banns to be read, for you to maybe get a new dress made if you want, for me to make arrangements at the ranch. Garrett will want me to move into the foreman's house anyway. It is bigger than the bunkhouse, and you could come live there with me. Or I could move here, help you run this place if you would rather stay." Beatrice considered. She had fought so hard for this homestead, poured so much of herself into it. But the truth was, running it alone would always be a struggle, and the foreman's house at the Triple Creek would offer more security, more community. "Could we keep this place? Maybe lease it out or hire someone to work it? I do not want to abandon it entirely, but I think living at the Triple Creek would be easier, at least while we are getting established." "We can absolutely do that," August agreed. "We could run some of the ranch's cattle on this land, use the barn for storage or as a winter shelter for animals. It would actually benefit the Triple Creek, having access to this grazing land. I am sure Garrett would be open to some kind of arrangement." They spent the rest of the day inside the warm cabin, talking through plans and possibilities, alternating between practical discussions and stolen kisses and moments of simply looking at each other with wonder at what they had found. August stayed for supper, and they sat together at the small table, fingers intertwined, talking about everything and nothing until full dark fell and he reluctantly had to leave. 3 weeks, he said at the door, kissing her one more time. 3 weeks and you will be my wife, Beatrice Xavier. I cannot wait, Beatrice said honestly. The following weeks were a flurry of activity and preparation. Martha Xavier, thrilled at the news of her son's engagement, took charge of organizing the wedding with efficient enthusiasm. The ceremony would be held at the small church in Parowan on the first Saturday in December. There would be a simple reception afterward in the church hall. Nothing fancy, but enough to celebrate properly with the community. Beatrice sewed herself a new dress with fabric that Martha helped her select, a deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes. It was not a traditional white wedding gown, but it was beautiful and practical, something she could wear to church on Sundays afterward. The other women from the quilting circle pitched in with advice and assistance, Sarah helping with the intricate buttonholes, Alina contributing some delicate lace for the collar, Mary embroidering tiny flowers along the cuffs. The banns were read for 3 consecutive Sundays, and if anyone in Parowan had objections to the marriage, they kept them to themselves. In fact, the general consensus seemed to be approval and pleasure that August had found someone, that the newcomer was becoming one of their own, that a love story was unfolding in their midst. August spent his evenings helping Beatrice pack up her possessions and prepare the cabin for winter vacancy. They would leave Clover and the chickens at the homestead under the care of a young man named Peter Simmons, who agreed to live there through the winter in exchange for housing and a share of any eggs and milk. It was a good arrangement, allowing Beatrice to keep her claim on the land while not having to manage it alone. The night before the wedding, Beatrice stayed with August Xavier, as was proper. She lay in the narrow guest bed, too excited and nervous to sleep, trying to comprehend that tomorrow she would become a wife, that she would promise her life to August in front of God and the community and commit to building a future together. It was everything she had never dared to hope for when she left Philadelphia, a kind of happiness she had not even known to wish for. The wedding day dawned cold but clear, the December sun bright against fresh snow. Beatrice dressed carefully with Martha's help, pinning up her hair with extra care and tucking a sprig of dried lavender into the arrangement for luck. Her mother's wedding ring hung on a chain around her neck until the ceremony, when it would be transferred to her finger by the man she loved. The church was full when she arrived, seemingly the entire town having turned out for the occasion. Beatrice walked down the aisle alone, having no father to give her away, but she did not feel alone. The community she had found here surrounded her with warmth and goodwill, and at the front of the church stood August, looking impossibly handsome in a new shirt and vest, his eyes locked on her with such love and devotion that her breath caught. The ceremony was simple and traditional, the words familiar even though Beatrice had never stood here as a bride before. She said her vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor August, to stand beside him in hardship and in joy, to build a life with him until death parted them. August's voice was steady as he made the same promises to her, slipping her mother's ring onto her finger, and then the preacher was pronouncing them husband and wife. Their kiss was chaste, appropriate for a church, but Beatrice could feel the promise of passion in it, the barely restrained joy and desire. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, everyone was smiling and someone started applauding and then everyone joined in, a wave of sound and celebration washing over them. The reception was everything Martha had promised, simple but heartfelt. There was food and music and dancing, and Beatrice found herself spinning across the floor in August's arms again, but this time as his wife. This time without any loneliness or uncertainty, only joy and the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "You know," August murmured in her ear as they danced, "I am not sure I properly thanked you." "Thank me for what?" Beatrice asked, confused. "For agreeing to marry me," August said. "For taking a chance on a cowboy you barely knew. For being brave enough to say yes to this life we are starting together. I know it is not easy, leaving everything familiar behind, trusting in something new. But I promise you, Beatrice, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." "I could never regret it," Beatrice said softly. "You gave me a dance when I had no partner. You saw me when I felt invisible. You helped me build a dream when I thought I would fail. How could I regret loving you?" They danced until the candles burned low and the music finally stopped, until the guests began to drift away into the cold December night. Martha hugged them both fiercely, made August promise to bring Beatrice for Sunday dinner once they were settled, and then she too left, leaving the newlyweds to begin their journey to the Triple Creek Ranch. The ride through the snowy night was cold but magical, the horse's breath steaming in the moonlight, the creak of saddle leather and the soft thud of hooves the only sounds in the crystalline silence. August had Beatrice seated in front of him, wrapped in blankets, held secure in his arms. She leaned back against his chest and let herself simply be held, safe and warm and utterly content. The foreman's house at the Triple Creek was larger than Beatrice's cabin had been, with 2 rooms and a sleeping loft, a substantial stone fireplace, and windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. August had prepared it for her arrival, stocking the shelves with food, laying in firewood, making up the bed with fresh linens. A vase of dried wildflowers sat on the table, a small touch that made her heart squeeze with love for this man who thought of such things. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," August said, carrying her across the threshold in the traditional way. "Home," Beatrice repeated, testing the word. It felt right. This place, this man, this life they would build together. All of it home. Their wedding night was tender and nervous and sweet. 2 people learning each other in the most intimate way possible. August was patient and gentle, making sure Beatrice felt safe and cherished. And if there was awkwardness, there was also laughter and whispered endearments, and the profound joy of finally becoming fully one. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Beatrice's head on August's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair, both of them too happy and awestruck to sleep just yet. "I love you," August said into the darkness. "I will love you tomorrow and the day after and every day for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for asking me to dance that night. Thank you for changing everything." "Best decision I ever made," August said, and Beatrice could hear the smile in his voice. They finally slept as the night deepened around them, safe and warm and together. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from loneliness and courage and love. The winter passed in a rhythm that was both familiar and entirely new. Beatrice settled into life at the Triple Creek Ranch, learning the patterns of the place, making friends with the other ranch families, finding her place in this new community. She cooked for the ranch hands occasionally when Cookie needed help, earning their devotion and August's pride. She continued attending quilting circle, growing closer to the other women, no longer an outsider but one of them. August taught her to ride properly, not just clinging to a saddle but truly riding, moving with the horse, communicating through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. They would take rides together on Sundays, exploring the surrounding territory, and August showed her places he loved. The high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in summer, the creek where he had learned to fish as a boy, the overlook that gave a view of the entire valley, mountains rising on all sides like protective walls. In return, Beatrice taught August small domestic skills he had never learned. How to darn his own socks properly, how to make bread that did not come out hard as rocks, how to clean a wound and wrap it so it healed without infection. They were small things, perhaps, but they felt important, these exchanges of knowledge and care that wove their lives together more tightly. Winter gave way to early spring, and with the thaw came new responsibilities. August was busy with calving season, spending long hours in the saddle checking on pregnant cows, helping with difficult births, moving the herd to spring pasture. Beatrice saw less of him during these weeks, but she understood. This was the life she had married into, the rhythms of ranching that dictated their days. She was not idle herself. The kitchen garden behind the foreman's house needed planting, and Beatrice threw herself into preparing the soil, starting seedlings in cans on the windowsill, planning what she would grow. Martha came to help and advise, and the two women worked side by side, their relationship deepening from polite acquaintance to genuine affection. "I am glad August found you," Martha said one afternoon as they worked. "I worried about him, spending so much time alone, throwing himself into work. He needed someone to remind him there is more to life than just getting through each day. You do that for him. You make him happy." "He makes me happy too," Beatrice said. "I did not think I would ever have this. A home, a family, someone who loves me. It feels like a miracle." "Perhaps it is," Martha said. "The good kind, the kind we make for ourselves by being brave enough to reach for what we want." As spring progressed, Beatrice began to suspect something that filled her with both joy and terror. Her monthly courses had not come, and she was feeling queasy in the mornings, exhausted by mid-afternoon. She waited, not wanting to say anything until she was certain, but by late April she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. She told August one evening as they sat together after supper, his arm around her shoulders, both of them watching the sun set through the western window. "I have news," she said, her heart pounding. "I am fairly certain I am with child." August went very still beside her. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor," Beatrice said. "All the signs are there. I think the baby will come in early winter, maybe November or December." August turned to look at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. You are pleased?" Beatrice asked, needing to hear him say it. "Pleased? Beatrice, I am overwhelmed, thrilled, terrified, all of it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were made of spun glass. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. We are going to have a family." "We already are a family," Beatrice said. "But yes, we are going to expand it." August laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed her thoroughly. "You have made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Beatrice's initial fears. She continued her normal activities well into the summer, though August fussed over her constantly, trying to keep her from lifting anything heavy or working too hard. It was both endearing and occasionally irritating, but Beatrice understood it came from love and let him fuss. The baby made itself known through increasingly vigorous movements, and August would spend evenings with his hand on Beatrice's swelling belly, marveling at each kick and tumble. They discussed names endlessly, never quite settling on anything definite, agreeing only that they wanted something strong and meaningful. Martha was thrilled at the prospect of a grandchild, immediately starting work on a layette, knitting tiny blankets and sweaters in soft wool. The women at Quilting Circle followed suit, and Beatrice found herself the recipient of countless gifts, the community embracing her baby as one of their own before it was even born. As summer faded into autumn, Beatrice's body grew heavy and uncomfortable. The baby rode low, making movement awkward, and she tired easily. August had arranged for the doctor from Cedar City to come stay at the ranch for the last few weeks of her pregnancy, wanting to make sure everything went smoothly. The contractions started on a cold November night, just as the first serious snowstorm of the season was beginning. August rode through the gathering storm to fetch Martha, and the two of them stayed with Beatrice through the long hours of labor. The doctor was calm and professional, but it was Martha's hand Beatrice gripped as the contractions intensified, Martha's voice that guided her breathing, Martha's strength that kept her grounded when the pain seemed unbearable. August waited in the next room, pacing and praying, feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. He could face down a charging bull, rope a runaway horse, work from dawn to dusk without complaint. But he could not ease his wife's pain, could not do anything but wait and hope and try to have faith that everything would be all right. Just after midnight, as the storm howled around the house, a baby's cry pierced the air. August burst through the door without waiting for permission and found Martha holding a tiny, squalling bundle while the doctor tended to Beatrice. "You have a son," Martha said, her face radiant with joy. "A healthy, strong boy." August looked at Beatrice, who was pale and exhausted but smiling, and then at the tiny creature his mother held. A son. They had a son. "Let me hold him," Beatrice said weakly, and Martha carefully placed the baby in his mother's arms. August knelt beside the bed, looking down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers that were already trying to grip, the dark eyes that seemed to look at him with ancient wisdom. "He is perfect," August whispered. "You are perfect, both of you." "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed this endlessly but never decided. Now, looking at their son, August knew. "How about Thomas, after my father, Thomas August Xavier?" "Thomas," Beatrice repeated softly. "Tommy, I like it. Welcome to the world, Tommy." The baby quieted at the sound of his mother's voice, and August felt his heart expand so much he thought it might burst. His wife, his son, his family. Everything he had ever wanted, more than he had dared to dream, all right here in this small room while the snow fell outside. The weeks after Tommy's birth were a blur of sleeplessness and joy. Beatrice recovered slowly, learning to nurse the baby, to soothe him when he cried, to function on fragments of sleep. August helped as much as he could, pacing the floor with Tommy when he fussed at night, changing soiled cloths, fetching whatever Beatrice needed. He fell in love with his son a little more each day, marveling at each tiny change and development. Winter settled in fully, and they became a tight family unit in the warm house, the outside world reduced to something distant and unimportant. August still had to work, but Garrett was understanding about the demands of new fatherhood, giving him the flexibility to be present as much as possible. Martha visited frequently, teaching Beatrice the skills of motherhood that no one had been able to teach her before. How to recognize different cries and what they meant. How to treat colic and cradle cap and all the minor ailments babies suffered. How to trust her instincts, to believe that she knew her son better than anyone else and could figure out what he needed. By the time Christmas arrived, Tommy was 6 weeks old and thriving. They celebrated quietly, just the small family at the ranch, but it was perfect in its simplicity. August gave Beatrice a beautiful locket with space for 2 photographs, and Beatrice gave August a new saddle she had been secretly saving for, made by the craftsman in Cedar City. But the real gift was Tommy, the family they had created, the love that filled their home to overflowing. "I keep thinking about that night at the barn dance," Beatrice said as they sat together on Christmas evening, Tommy sleeping in the cradle August had built with his own hands. "How lonely I felt, how uncertain about everything. And then you asked me to dance and everything changed." "Changed for me too," August said, pulling her close. "Found my future that night, found you. Best thing I ever did was walk across that barn and say hello to the pretty girl standing alone." "I was not very pretty that night," Beatrice protested. "I was dusty from traveling and nervous and completely out of place." "You were beautiful," August insisted. "You are always beautiful to me, but more than that, you were brave. You still are." You came all this way, built a life from nothing, said yes to marrying me even though we barely knew each other. You gave birth to our son during a snowstorm. You are the bravest person I know, Beatrice." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind that came from being loved and seen and appreciated. "I love you so much. Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and discover this was all a dream." "Not a dream," August assured her. "This is real. We are real. Our love, our family, all of it is as real as anything has ever been." The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the ordinary miracles of a life well lived. Tommy grew from baby to toddler to a sturdy little boy who loved horses and following his father around the ranch. Beatrice's homestead was successfully leased to Peter Simmons, who eventually bought it outright and started his own family there, maintaining a friendship with August and Beatrice that lasted decades. 3 years after Tommy was born, Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline Martha Xavier, for both of their mothers. Caroline was quieter than her brother, thoughtful and observant, with her mother's light brown hair and her father's golden brown eyes. 2 years later came another son, Henry, who was all energy and mischief from the moment he could crawl. August was promoted to full partner in the Triple Creek Ranch when Thomas Garrett decided to semi-retire, recognizing August's skill and dedication and years of faithful service. It meant more responsibility but also more stability, the assurance that they could stay in this place they had made home, raise their children surrounded by community and love and the vast Utah wilderness. Beatrice never forgot where she had come from or how far she had traveled. She told her children stories about Philadelphia, about their grandparents who had died before they were born, about the long journey west and the courage it had taken to start over. But she also told them about their father's courage, how he had seen her when she was invisible, how he had helped her build a dream into reality, how his love had given her a family and a home and a future. "Your father asked me to dance when I had no partner," she would tell them. And that changed everything. As the children grew, they witnessed their parents' love daily. The way August would kiss Beatrice goodbye each morning before heading out to work. The way Beatrice would wait at the window watching for August to come home each evening. The way they still took Sunday rides together when they could, leaving the children with Martha, stealing time alone to remember who they had been before they were parents, to nurture the love that had started it all. There were hard times too, as there must be in any life. Years when drought made the ranching difficult. The winter when Henry caught pneumonia and they thought they might lose him, sitting up through frightening nights while he struggled to breathe. The summer when a wildfire came too close to the ranch and every able body had to fight to save their homes and livestock. The losses of friends and community members who did not survive the harsh realities of frontier life. But through it all, August and Beatrice held fast to each other and to the family they had built. They grew older together, their faces weathering from sun and wind, their hands growing more calloused from work, but their love only deepening with each passing year. Tommy grew up to be a skilled rancher like his father, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations of the Triple Creek. He married a girl from Cedar City, a school teacher named Anne, and gave August and Beatrice their first grandchildren. Caroline became a midwife and healer, carrying on the tradition of women helping women through the challenges of childbirth and illness. She married late, at 28, to a widower with 2 young children, and built a family that blended old and new with grace and love. Henry was the adventurer, leaving for a few years to see California and Oregon, but eventually returning to Utah with stories and a wife, settling on land near his parents and starting his own ranch. The years turned into decades, and August and Beatrice watched their family grow and spread, their legacy extending through children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They never left the Triple Creek Ranch, never wanted to. This was where they had built their life, where every fence post and irrigation ditch held memories, where the land itself was woven into their story. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the church in Parowan, the same church where they had married all those years ago. The entire community turned out, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by this couple who had started with nothing but courage and love. August and Beatrice stood together in front of the church, his arm around her waist in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing, and looked out at the crowd of beloved faces, their children with families of their own. Martha, now in her 90s but still sharp and vital. Friends from those early days, the ones who had helped build a homestead and supported a new marriage. Younger people who had been born long after that first barn dance but who knew the story, who had heard about the Eastern girl who came alone and the cowboy who asked her to dance. "Should we dance?" August asked Beatrice, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love. "At our age, we might break something," Beatrice teased, but she was already accepting his extended hand. The fiddles started up, the same sweet sound that had filled the barn that autumn night 4 decades ago, and August led Beatrice in a slow waltz while everyone watched and applauded. They moved together with the ease of 40 years of partnership, bodies that knew each other completely, hearts that beat in synchrony. "I would do it all again," August said softly as they danced. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. All of it exactly the same as long as it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," Beatrice agreed. "You gave me everything, August. A home, a family, a life I never dared to imagine. All because you saw me when I thought I was invisible." "You were never invisible," August said. "You were always the brightest thing in any room. I just had the good sense to walk across that barn and introduce myself." They danced until the song ended, and then they were surrounded by family, by grandchildren clamoring for attention, by friends offering congratulations and reminiscences. The party continued late into the evening, full of food and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from being part of something larger than yourself, part of a community and a family and a love story that had touched countless lives. As the celebration finally wound down and people began to drift home, August and Beatrice found themselves alone again, standing outside the church under a sky full of brilliant stars. The autumn air was crisp and clean, smelling of wood smoke and fallen leaves, and Beatrice leaned against August's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute certainty that he would always be there beside her. 40 years, she said wonderingly. Where did the time go? Into living, August replied. Into building and loving and making a life worth having. The best kind of time, the kind that leaves you satisfied rather than regretful. No regrets, Beatrice agreed. Not a single one. They stood there together under the stars. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from loneliness and courage, and one brave invitation to dance. Around them, the Utah wilderness stretched vast and eternal, holding their story in the land they had worked, in the community they had helped build, in the children and grandchildren who carried forward their legacy of love and determination and faith in each other. August and Beatrice, Xavier would live another 15 years after that anniversary, dying within months of each other in their 80s, surrounded by family and love to the very end. Their story became legend in Parowan, told and retold, the tale of the Eastern girl who came alone and the cowboy who asked her to dance, who built a life together in the hard Utah territory and loved each other with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. The Triple Creek Ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, and on the wall of the main house hung a faded photograph from that first barn dance in autumn of 1878. If you looked closely, you could see a young woman standing alone against the barn wall and a tall cowboy beginning to walk in her direction. The moment before everything changed. The moment before a love story began. And if you visited the old homestead that Beatrice had first claimed, now part of a larger ranch but still standing, you could see the cabin they had worked so hard to prepare for winter, the barn they had repaired together, the irrigation ditch they had cleared side by side. Physical evidence of partnership and love, testament to what two people could build when they found each other and chose to hold fast no matter what challenges came. But perhaps the truest legacy was in the descendants who still lived in the valley, who carried forward the values of courage and determination and love that August and Beatrice had embodied. In the way families still told the story to their children, reminding them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask someone to dance or say yes when someone asks you. That love can grow from the smallest seed of kindness into something that lasts generations. On summer evenings, if you stood in the old barn where that first dance had taken place over a century ago, you could almost hear the faint echo of fiddle music, the whisper of skirts across the floor, the sound of a voice saying, "That is about to change," to a lonely woman who thought she would always be alone. And maybe, if you believed in such things, you could sense the presence of two souls who had found each other there, who had loved with a faithfulness that transcended death, who were together still in whatever came after this life. But that was just romantic fancy, perhaps. What was real, what could not be denied, was the power of that first moment of connection, the courage it took to reach across loneliness and offer partnership to someone who needed it. August had seen Beatrice standing alone, and he had made a choice to change that. And in making that choice, he had changed both their lives completely, had set in motion a love story that would echo through generations. That was the magic of it, the lesson that endured. One person, one moment, one act of kindness and courage. That was all it took to change everything. To turn loneliness into belonging, isolation into family, desperation into hope. August had asked Beatrice to dance, and in doing so he had given her a future. She had said yes, and in doing so had given him the same. Together they had built something that lasted. Together they had proven that love, real love, the kind that works and builds and endures through hardship and joy alike, was possible. That it was worth reaching for, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. And it all started with a dance, with a cowboy who saw a woman without a partner and decided that was about to change. That simple act of seeing, of caring, of reaching out across the space that separated them, that was where the story began. Everything else, all the joy and family and legacy that followed, grew from that single moment of connection. It was a good story. A true story in all the ways that mattered. And it lived on long after August and Beatrice were gone. A testament to the power of love and courage and the simple human need to be seen, to be chosen, to belong to someone who chooses you right back. That was the gift they gave each other that autumn night in 1878, in a barn in Parowan, Utah Territory. And it was a gift that kept giving, rippling outward through time, touching lives and hearts long after the two people at the center of it had passed into memory and legend. Their love had been ordinary in its daily expression, extraordinary in its faithfulness. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.